Have you ever looked in the mirror and felt just for a moment like a stranger was looking back at you? It's a feeling many people, especially women, experience as they get older. A strange disconnect between the person you feel you are on the inside and the face the world sees. Hello, I'm John from Texas, United States, your friend and narrator of real stories. Stay with me until the end of this incredible story. Want to see your story told here? Then get in touch with us. For most of her life, the mirror had been a friend to Evelyn, a confidant. It had reflected a young woman with bright eyes, a confident mother in her prime, and a graceful woman who navigated her 50s and 60s with an elegance that turned heads. Her beauty was not a source of vanity, not in a boastful way. It was simply a part of her identity, a quiet, reassuring confirmation of her vitality. But now, at 73, the mirror had become a cruel stranger. It showed her a face she did not recognize, a face that belonged to one of those other old-age people. The woman who stared back at her had a roadmap of wrinkles that told stories she didn't want to read. Her hair, once a thick, lustrous brown, was now a thin, wispy silver. And her eyes, her once bright eyes, seemed to have retreated, clouded by a weariness that went bone deep. This was not just the natural progression of age. For Evelyn, it felt like a slow, cruel erasure of self. She was becoming invisible, a ghost haunting the beautiful shell of her former self. Her husband of 52 years, George, seemed oblivious to her internal war. He would look at her with the same adoring eyes he'd had since they were 20. "You're beautiful, Evie," he would say, and the words, once a source of joy, now felt like a casual lie, a kindness that only highlighted the terrible truth she saw in the mirror. Their love story, a beautiful epic book of shared dreams, felt like it was about a character she could no longer play. This internal battle was a secret she kept locked away, but it was affecting her health in subtle, insidious ways. A quiet anxiety became her constant companion. She suffered from a fitful insomnia, waking in the night with her heart pounding, her mind replaying the image of the old woman in the mirror. She began to withdraw. Her weekly lunch dates with her circle of friends, a ritual for over 30 years, were now met with last-minute excuses. She couldn't bear their well-meaning compliments, which felt as false as her husband's. The crisis came to a head with the arrival of a thick, cream-colored envelope in the mail. It was the wedding invitation for her eldest granddaughter, Jessica, a joyous occasion. But as Evelyn held the invitation, a wave of pure dread washed over her. The wedding would be a grand affair. There would be cameras, capturing every wrinkle, every imperfection for posterity. The thought of being on display, of being seen as the old grandmother in the family portraits, filled her with a panic so intense it made her feel sick. This feeling of dread about a happy event is so powerful. Have you ever felt anxiety about a celebration because of how you thought you would look or be perceived? Share your thoughts on this in the comments. What would she wear? The beautiful dresses in her closet now seemed like costumes for a role she could no longer inhabit. How could she stand next to the radiant young bride, feeling like a faded, crumbling ruin? Her anxiety began to curdle into a strange resentment. She was resentful of her granddaughter's effortless youth, of other women her age who seemed to have accepted their aging with a grace she could not muster. And in the darkest corners of her heart, she felt a flicker of resentment towards God. Her faith had always been a quiet, constant comfort. She read her Bible. She believed in the grace of Jesus. But now her prayers felt hollow. The verses about inner beauty felt like platitudes. How could her soul be beautiful when she felt such ugliness in her own skin. Days turned into a week, and her mood grew darker. George, bless his heart, was growing increasingly concerned. He saw her pushing food around her plate, her favorite television shows unwatched, her laughter completely silenced. "What is it, Evie?" he would ask, his voice full of a gentle worry. "Is it your health? Should we see a doctor?" "I'm fine, George," she would reply, her voice flat. "Just tired." But she wasn't just tired. She was disappearing. One afternoon, he found her in their bedroom, standing in front of her open closet, weeping, not loud, dramatic sobs, but the silent, shoulder-shaking tears of absolute hopelessness. A beautiful emerald green dress was clutched in her hands. "Evie, my love, what is it?" he asked, rushing to her side. He tried to put his arms around her, but she stiffened, pulling away. She couldn't bear his touch. She felt too ugly, too unworthy of his affection. The rejection wounded him. She saw it in his eyes. He looked utterly lost. "I can't go," she whispered, the words ragged. "I can't go to the wedding." "Not go?" he said, astounded. "But why? It's Jessica's big day." "You don't understand," she wept, finally letting the wall crumble. She sank onto the edge of the bed, the green dress pooling at her feet like a discarded skin. She looked at her loving, confused husband, her partner of 52 years, and confessed the secret shame that was eating her alive. "I don't know who that is," she said, her voice a broken whisper as she pointed a trembling finger towards the full-length mirror on the closet door. "I look in that mirror, and I see a stranger, an old woman, and I don't know who she is. I don't know who I am anymore." George looked at his wife, his vibrant Evelyn, crumpled in a heap of sorrow, and his heart broke. He didn't understand her pain, not fully. To him, she was as lovely as the day he had met her. The lines on her face were not flaws. They were the testament to their shared life. But he saw that his compliments, his reassurances, were like rain on a stone wall. They weren't getting through to her heart. He knew he couldn't convince her that the reflection in the mirror was wrong. He had to show her that he was looking at something else entirely. He sat down beside her on the bed, not crowding her, just offering his quiet presence. "I don't know who I am anymore," she had said. The words echoed in the room, full of a pain he knew he had to try and heal. "Then let me remind you," he said softly. That evening, after a tense, quiet dinner, George went to the large wooden chest in the living room where they kept a lifetime of memories. He returned, not with one photo album, but with a stack of them. He placed them on the coffee table, a chronological archive of their love story. He sat on the sofa and patted the cushion beside him. "Come sit with me, Evie," he said gently. Reluctantly, she moved from her armchair and sat beside him, a wary distance between them. George opened the first album, its pages brittle with age. He stopped at a faded black-and-white photograph from their first real date. A young, nervous-looking George stood beside a radiant Evelyn at a county fair. "Look at this one," he said. "You were 17. You were, without a doubt, the most beautiful girl I had ever seen." Evelyn just shrugged, a flicker of pain in her eyes. "I don't look like that anymore." "No," George agreed, and his agreement surprised her. He turned to face her, his gaze direct and full of a profound sincerity. "You were beautiful then, yes. But that's not what I remember most about this day. I remember I had spent my last dollar trying to win you that stuffed bear at the ring toss, and I failed miserably. I was so embarrassed, and you just laughed, took my hand, and said, 'It's the trying that counts.' In that moment, Evie, I didn't just see a pretty girl. I saw a kind heart. That's what I fell in love with. Not the face in this picture, but the kindness in your soul. What a beautiful way for a husband to show his love. What is the most loving compliment you have ever received from a partner? One that had nothing to do with your appearance. We would love to read your stories in the comments. He turned the page to their wedding photo. And here, he said, our wedding day. Everyone told me I was the luckiest man in the world to be marrying such a beautiful bride. And they were right. But the reason I felt lucky had nothing to do with this white dress. It was because, at the altar, when my voice cracked during our vows, you squeezed my hand so tight, a silent message that you were there, that we were in this together. I fell in love with your loyalty, Evie, your unwavering, I've got your back strength. This became their new ritual. Every night, George would open another album and tell her the story of a photograph, from his perspective, always focusing on a quality of her character. He showed her a picture of herself, holding their firstborn son, her face exhausted but glowing. Your mother was worried you had lost your figure, he recalled. But I looked at you, and I saw a warrior. I saw a woman with a capacity for love so fierce it rearranged the world. I had never seen anything more beautiful. He showed her a picture from a time they had faced a financial crisis, her face etched with worry. This was one of the hardest years of our lives, he said. But I remember you sitting at this very kitchen table, night after night, finding ways to stretch every dollar, refusing to let us be defeated. You never lost hope. I didn't fall in love with your smile, Evie. I fell in love with your resilience. It's amazing how a change in perspective can begin to heal a deep wound. Do you believe our partners can sometimes see us more clearly than we see ourselves? Let us know what you think. Slowly, gently, he was performing a kind of soul surgery. He was untangling her identity from the fragile anchor of her physical appearance and re-anchoring it to the eternal bedrock of her character. He was telling her the truth of their love story, a truth she had forgotten. He was showing her that he saw her, the real her, and that the woman he saw was more beautiful now than ever before. Evelyn's tears didn't stop, but their flavor changed. They were no longer tears of despair, but tears of release. She was listening, truly listening, and beginning to believe. The insomnia that had been her nightly torment began to ease. The anxious thoughts were still there, but now they had a counter-narrative, the voice of her husband, reminding her of who she truly was. Her crisis of faith began to heal as well. She realized George was doing God's work. He was living out the very essence of a Christian love, a love that always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. He was her earthly example of the unconditional love of Jesus, a love that sees beyond the flesh to the true worth of the soul. One evening, they reached the final album, the one with pictures from the last decade. George pointed to a photo taken just 2 years ago at a family barbecue. In it, Evelyn was laughing, her face full of wrinkles, her hair completely silver. "This one," George said, his voice thick with emotion. "This one is my favorite." Evelyn looked at the photo, at the woman she had come to despise in the mirror. "But why?" she whispered. "Look at all those lines around my eyes." "I love those lines," George said, his thumb gently tracing the edge of the photograph. "Because I know what every single one of them means. This one," he said, pointing, "is from the thousands of times you smiled at our children. This one, right here, in between your brows, is from the night we stayed up all night worrying when our daughter was sick. This one is from laughing so hard at my terrible jokes. And this one, he said, his voice dropping, is from the day we buried your mother, when you were so strong for everyone. Evie, don't you see? He took her hand, his warm, familiar grip, a comfort she was finally able to accept again. When I look at you, I don't just see a 73-year-old woman. I see the brave girl at the county fair. I see the loyal bride at the altar. I see the warrior mother and the resilient partner. I see every chapter of our epic book, all at once. I see my whole life. And that, my love, is the most beautiful thing in the world. George's words were a key, unlocking a door in Evelyn's heart that had been rusted shut with self-criticism and fear. For the first time in years, she looked at her husband and saw not just a kind man who loved her, but a truth-teller, a mirror to her soul who reflected a beauty she had been completely blind to. The healing was not instantaneous, but it was profound. The next morning, she walked into the bathroom and looked in the mirror. The old woman was still there, with her wrinkles and her silver hair. But this time, Evelyn looked closer. She saw the line by her mouth that appeared when she smiled, and she remembered George's story about her laughter. She saw the faint crease between her brows, and she remembered his story about her fierce concentration as she helped her son with his homework. She was beginning to see the woman from his stories, not the stranger she had feared. Her home, which had started to feel like a house of mirrors reflecting only her decline, began to feel like a sanctuary again. Her insomnia lessened, replaced by a quiet peace as she lay beside her husband, feeling the warmth of his love, a love that saw beyond her skin. Her prayers to God took on a new tone, one of gratitude. She thanked God not for youth or for beauty, but for the gift of a partner who loved her so completely, a man who embodied the patient, kind, and persevering love described in the pages of her Bible. With this new, fragile confidence, she made a decision. She walked to the beautiful, cream-colored invitation that still sat on her dresser. She picked it up, her hands steady, and whispered, "Yes, I'll go." The dread she had once felt about the wedding was replaced by a quiet resolve. This was her granddaughter's day, the start of a new family love story, and she would be there to witness it, not as a fading relic, but as the proud matriarch she was. The battle of the closet was next. But this time, when she opened the doors, she wasn't looking for a dress that would make her look younger. She was looking for a dress that would make her feel like herself, the strong, resilient, and deeply loved woman from her husband's stories. Isn't it interesting how the clothes we choose can reflect our inner state of mind? Have you ever found renewed confidence in an old outfit, or chosen a new one to mark a new chapter in your life? Tell us about it in the comments. She chose a simple, elegant dress of deep sapphire blue, one that brought out the color of her eyes. It didn't hide her wrinkles or her age. It complemented them with a quiet dignity. When George saw her in it, he simply smiled. "There you are, Evie," he said softly, as if she had just returned from a long journey. The day of the wedding arrived. As Evelyn got ready, she still felt a flutter of nerves, but it was no longer the panic of before. It was the gentle excitement of a woman about to celebrate her family. When she walked into the church, leaning on George's arm, she held her head high. She was not invisible. She was Evelyn, a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a woman whose life was a rich and epic book. During the reception, her granddaughter, the radiant bride, came to her side. "Grandma," she said, her eyes shining, "you look so beautiful." A few weeks ago, Evelyn would have deflected the compliment with a self-deprecating remark. Now, she simply smiled and squeezed her granddaughter's hand. "Thank you, my dear. And you are the picture of joy." She pulled her granddaughter a little closer. "Can I tell you a secret about what makes a love story last 50 years?" she whispered. "Find a man who, when you are old and gray, will have the grace to tell you the story of your own life and remind you of the beautiful woman you have always been." What a powerful piece of wisdom to pass down. What is the most important piece of advice about love or marriage that you would give to the next generation? Share your wisdom with our community below. Later that evening, the band started to play a slow, sweet melody from a bygone era. George turned to Evelyn and held out his hand. "May I have this dance, my love?" he asked. As he led her to the dance floor, she melted into his embrace. They moved slowly, gracefully, a single unit in the center of the room, surrounded by the family they had created. She rested her head on his shoulder, closing her eyes, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. In that moment, she was not young and she was not old. She was simply, completely, and profoundly loved. She finally understood. True beauty was not the absence of wrinkles. It was the presence of a life well lived. It was not the reflection in the mirror. It was the reflection of love in her husband's eyes. The story of Evelyn and George is a beautiful testament to a love that sees beyond the surface. It is a powerful reminder to all of us, especially women, that our worth is not measured by the youthfulness of our reflection, but by the depth of our character and the love we give. It teaches us that the right partner does not just love us in spite of our aging. They love us because of it, because every line on our face is a chapter in the beautiful story they have shared with us. If this story of a love that redefines beauty has touched your heart, please honor it with a like and subscribe to Stories Beyond 50 for more stories that celebrate the wisdom and grace of a life fully lived. And now, we open this space to you, our wise community. How has your perception of beauty changed as you've gotten older? How has your partner or your faith helped you navigate the changes you see in the mirror? What is the most beautiful quality a person can have, regardless of their age? Your insights are a precious gift. Please share them with us in the comments below. And if you are not ready to share, but you believe that true love sees with the heart and not just with the eyes, just write the single word love in the comments. Let us celebrate a beauty that never fades. We read and cherish every word. God bless you, and we will see you in the next story.